Today we have with us John Miller, CEO of the Guide Dog Foundation and its sister organization, America VetDogs. Uh, John, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Ken. We're very happy to be here.
Awesome. So, John, one of the things that I usually like to start off with is maybe you can tell us a little bit about the mission of the Guide Dog Foundation and America's VetDogs and what you're trying to accomplish.
Sure. So, every day we're trying to make people's lives better so they can live with dignity and independence. And, the Guide Dog Foundation's been around almost 75 years at this point, and they've been doing a great job, not only here on Long Island, but across the country. And, America's VetDogs is a little newer, about 15 years old at this point, and we work with, honorably discharged veterans from all eras and first responders, to get them a service dog. And it's just such an incredible organization as we move forward. I call it the happiest place, on Long Island. If you come there at any point in time when people are being paired with their dogs, just the energy and the emotion, it's just so real.
Yeah, I got to believe that that's an incredible situation. I mean, anytime I know, when I got my new puppy, that was like amazing. So when you kind of pair off, that's incredible. You're relatively new to these organizations. What kind of drew you to?
A couple different things. So I'm there now 15 months, so a little more than a year. We're just
Is it 15 months? Wow.
15 months, yeah.
Wow.
Just
seems like it's 3 years. Seeing your face all over the place.
And what's not to love, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
15 months in, and as we move forward as an organization, we have a lot to do. But what drove me there is really, the quality of people and the nature of the work. If you look at it from America's VetDogs side of the house, so to speak, both my grandfathers were in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
One of them actually was blind in one eye, and I've seen them interact with dogs through the course of their life, and have both passed. But I wish they knew, what was available, and I wish this was available to them, back then. And I got to tell you, Ken, the one thing that has stood out for me more than anything here is,
Mm-hmm.
is the quality of all of our people, whether it's our staff, whether it's our clients, whether it's our donors, whether it's our volunteers. It's really impressive how much people, step up and care.
One of the things that I've found that the organization has done very, very well in is developing strategic alliances and kind of working with not just other nonprofit organizations, but also the for-profit community. And that, I think, is a way that organizations can kind of define themselves and find ways to grow quicker and raise other types of money. How have you gone about kind of creating these relationships and creating those critical strategic alliances?
Sure. Strategic alliances are critical to the lifeblood of our organization. We're going to be announcing a new partnership next week.
Wow.
On the Today Show, actually.
You don't want to announce it today?
Well, I'll give you a little preview. I'll give you a little sneak. We'll tease up to it a little bit. But
come on, let us outscoop them.
So we have another major charity on Long Island that we're going to be working with and placing a dog in their facility, and it's just going to be, as I said, our place is, one of the happiest places on Long Island. This charity, I think, is right up there. And you're going to have a dog in their facility to help, children who, need a boost from time to time. And as the organization, I'll just give you some background on how we came to certain partnerships. But when you're working with other charities, I think there's two things in particular that I look at. Number one is the leadership. Is the leadership stable? Is the leadership strong? Number two, brand recognition, and really trust and value added, right? So those are really the factors. On a diligence standpoint, you look at it from, if it's a charity, the rating agencies, Charity Navigator,
Right.
Guide Star. You look at their financials. You talk to some of their people. To see, get the pulse of the organization. And really, we don't make any of these decisions lightly, and we want to have good partners. But, number one, I would say, is, strong leadership.
Okay, so that's on the nonprofit side. What about on the for-profit side? Because I know on the for-profit side, you have certain strategic alliances with for-profit businesses.
Mm-hmm.
You've also developed relationships with, you said, Today
Mm-hmm.
Show.
Yep.
So why don't you talk a little bit about how you went about developing those relationships, and B, you mentioned when you look at another nonprofit organization, you're interested in their brand.
Mm-hmm.
How do you value your brand in kind of working with some of these other strategic partners on the for-profit side?
Sure. So on the for-profit side, you look, leadership's the same, right? Leadership is, the critical component. I'll give you a little, for instance, one of the relationships, that was an offshoot, this year of our relationship with NBC and the Today Show was a partnership we did with the NHL and NBC Sports around the Stanley Cup.
You put little skates on the puppies and drop them onto
we did not put skates on the puppies. We did something even better than that. We had what we called the Stanley Pup.
Oh, wow.
who was one of our dogs, actually the Today Show dog Sonny, who is just an
Oh, so his
amazing.
name wasn't Stanley.
His name was
No.
not Stanley, it was
Okay.
Sonny, but
Okay. So it's a Sunny Pup.
Sonny Pup. Yep.
False advertising.
Yeah, the Sonny Pup. But he was with the Stanley Cup, and we have some great photos of that. But one of the keys to that partnership was that it worked for both sides of the organization, right? And it worked for both partners. From the NBC Sports position, and I don't want to speak for them, but I think our brand and the quality of the dogs that we place and our financials made them feel safe in picking us as a partner. Our relationship with the Today Show was also very helpful in leveraging that opportunity. And on the back end for us, we had one of our most talented trainers with one of the most well-trained dogs traveling the country, getting free airtime for the organization on all these different markets. They were in Denver, they were in San Jose, they were here in New York, where we also have a dog placed with the New York Islanders, Radar. And I know yesterday was the NHL awards, and they won Coach of the Year, and the goalie.
Did he win? Did he win Dog of the Year?
There was a vote. I didn't see the results. I didn't see it. I hope we won. I know we were going neck and neck with the Washington Capitals dog and the St. Louis Blues dog, who won the Stanley Cup. But we're in these things to win. But more importantly, it's about the awareness that it brought the organization.
How do you find these strategic partners, and how do you develop these strategic relationships?
It's about being out there. It's about meeting people, being at events, talking about the organization. Very often, people come up to me at an event or on a show after a show like this, and approach us about different ideas that they have, and we do the same. We have great brand recognition at this point, and we'll talk a little bit about President Bush and his dog Sully a little later. But as you work the landscape, so to speak, you meet people. You have to be honest, B, trustworthy, and C, willing to listen to ideas. And if you're open to those three things, or you are those three things, these opportunities seem to happen pretty organically. But there's also a perspective where we have strategic goals and strategic ideas that we want to accomplish, that we would actually look to search out certain partners to meet those goals as well.
So you talk about having strategic goals and looking for specific strategic alliances. So at the board level, are you kind of going through this process and saying, okay, these are the strategic alliances we're trying to create? Or is it more of, it happens to fall in your lap or happens to happen? I mean, how do you kind of create those opportunities for yourself?
So we're pretty intentional about it. At a board level, we just finished, putting in place, the final touches or final pieces of our strategic plan, which basically outlines, the goals and the strategy for the next 3 to 5 years. And, as part of those, there are measures of how we're going to monitor ourselves. And, a couple of those goals, we're going to need partners, to effectuate. And so once we know, what the plan is, which we're very comfortable with at this point, we do some brainstorming with the board and with the staff and, with all of our constituencies about how to best, to get there and, who to search out and who to look for.
See, that's one of the things that I find that most organizations aren't necessarily looking at. They tend to be more reactionary than kind of looking at things from a proactive basis. So how do you go about developing a proactive plan in order to kind of seek out and kind of develop these alliances?
You got to be disciplined to do it, and, I find myself all the time, getting dragged into the day to day, right? As we all do, right? You live in the here and now, and you got to meet today's goals.
Crisis management.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you got to be intentional about taking the time to try to elevate out of that and, move forward and spend time on the planning piece. I tell our team all the time, we operate on parallel tracks, and, the day-to-day is not going to get any easier, right? And we still need to meet or exceed all of our goals for the year, but we are very actively planning, for the future. We're in, pretty big growth mode at this point. We'll have placed more dogs than in any year, in the organization's history this past year. We have record demand. We have to raise a lot of money to do it. And the only way we're going to be able to satisfy the demand is by doing our jobs well, but by also, providing some time, to think about the future, and whether that's staffing or facilities or, alternative ways or fundraising or creating alliances, that's something we do spend time on.
So one of the alliances that you have established, I believe, and I'm pretty sure it's still in place, is you have with a dog toy company?
So we have, well, actually, it's a dog treat company.
Dog treat company.
Yeah. So we have dog treats. America's VetDogs Treats. It's a brand licensing initiative where we work with a company based out of Ohio to provide treats, across the country. You can find them in all the major retailers. One of our graduates and his service dog are right on the cover with our, brand and logo. And it's a great way, to extend the brand and extend our recognition while providing a quality product in the marketplace.
So again, coming back to that vetting process, how do you determine who you want to work with? How did you pick that strategic partner? And then how did you determine what your brand value was in order to determine what your part of the royalty rights should be?
That's a great question because we're looking at additional potential products right now and going through this, very specific product process. The dog treats have been there years and years, way before I got to the organization. But there's a very, high, look at the quality of the product and make sure the product was high quality, B, healthy for the dogs, and C, something that the marketplace needed. Right now we're assessing a couple different opportunities that have we've been working on through another organization, and I can assure you, we feel much stronger that our brand is worth a lot more than people are willing to pay right now, right? But there's also a certain reality to it. You have to, in this case, assess what the type of product is, what the market potential is, and then what is what are you willing to take as as a minimum, so to speak, from a financial perspective. And I was joking when I said it, but your brand is no more valuable than you, the user, and you, the people who are responsible for stewarding it and making sure we have the good name. So you have to have a reasonable approach to it too. That's why you got to talk to multiple people, to get their feedback. Different competing entities. The market I found will be pretty honest with you where the value is, and you have to make decisions whether or not you're ready to jump at that price point.
All right. So if you guys have done a good job at this, but there's a lot of nonprofit organizations that would love to be in your situation and haven't gotten there yet. So what should a nonprofit organization do? How can nonprofits start to develop these strategic alliances that you guys have already been successful in doing? What advice could you give them?
The only advice I would give is you got to know what your plan is, right? You got to have a plan. What are your goals? What is your plan? Be deliberate about it. And then look for relationships that help you fill the need or fill a gap or a value add to what your organization is doing, right? I've found some partnerships are good, some don't always work out the way you hope. But if you're honest about it, and here's the real big thing, it's about being intentional about it, right? You have to have a mindset that plans for things, and a little foresight looking into the future, because a lot of these partnerships are not instant result based, right? You have to be willing to invest 2 to 3 years at least to maximize these opportunities that are out there.
So organizations, you're saying, then should be kind of stepping back and saying, okay, who are we? What are we looking to accomplish as an organization? What business partners exist out there in the marketplace that are going to be effective for us to partner with? Yep. And then start to make inroads into those strategic partnerships to try to kind of build the relationship.
You just said it a lot better than I did, but you nailed it, right? Okay. It's to me, it's just about being intentional, right? And having a plan, and then executing on the plan. And you got to realize that things sometimes aren't going to work. So you need a plan B or C, sometimes as well. It's really about how you spend your time, right? It's about how you spend your time as an executive. There's a lot of time public facing, public education, fundraising, managing the day-to-day, crisis management. You need to set some time aside, the plan for the future, and utilize your board, as partners in that. And sometimes the more opinions, it's harder to manage, but ultimately, that's where some of your best thinking comes from as well.
Now you're a national organization, which then allows you to tap into national brands. So if there's an organization that is not national but more local, sure, then they could do the same thing from a local perspective and not necessarily have to worry about it from a national perspective, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's we are national, and in some cases we're international. We provide clients, guide dogs across the world, really. But our home base here is Long Island. And we've actually over the course of this past 15 months have been refocusing on reintroducing ourselves to Long Island, right? Our home base. And I can assure you, whether it was here with the guide dog or a previous organization I was with, there's plenty of opportunity here on Long Island. I mean, you're right here, you're right outside Manhattan. Local organizations are always looking to partner. In some cases, are looking to scale up or complement product line or service that they provide. There's more than a fair share of potential partners here locally.
So what can a nonprofit organization do to create that value proposition that they can bring to a for-profit business to say, hey, look, this is what we have to offer. Here's why you should be partnering with us.
Yeah, I think you got to be prepared to tell your story, right? You need to know what your value is. You need to know what you do better as an organization than anybody else, and why that would be attractive, to a potential partner. And then also you need to have some potential goals in mind as to what you want to accomplish when approaching somebody, right? When we did the Stanley Pup partnership, what was attractive about it to us is that it was providing us direct access into certain markets that that we were looking to grow awareness in. And from our standpoint, it was a perfect fit for us. And from a brand perspective, the more things you're out there doing with credible partners, the higher the value of your brand and
That's right,
the
yeah.
products that that you have. And our biggest wish is to satisfy the demand that's out there. So we're looking at every possible venue, both local and national, to raise enough money to build enough awareness, so we have the resources to provide dogs who need them.
So when you look at the different partnerships that you've entered into, how do you determine whether those partnerships are worth it for you to be involved in the long term? How do you measure whether those partnerships are effective or not effective? At what point in time do you just cut bait and say, this one's not working, or hey, this one's doing really well, let me kind of leverage that one into more things?
You look at it, there's two very different ways of looking at it. Number one is the bottom line way. Is it financially
but how do you,
benefiting the
sometimes
organization?
it's hard to actually translate something from a concept or information. Like we all the time, we do all types of different marketing types of things, and how do you translate that into return on investment or direct results?
It's in some cases it's not black and white, right? It's about assessing the impact. Every partnership we have, we go into with established goals, right? So for instance, I'll go to our Today Show, right? The Today Show really doesn't necessarily directly translate into fundraising dollars for us, but we've been contacted by so many potential clients and so many potential corporate partners because of our relationship with the Today Show, and they've seen the quality of the dogs that we have, and the heart-wrenching stories, and how the dogs have really saved people's lives literally. And it's kind of the halo effect. Mm-hmm. And so you could look at it by from a revenue perspective, but also the other relationships that it brings to you.
So brand awareness.
Yeah, brand awareness, and service awareness, right? It's America's VetDogs. It's kind of in our name what we do, right? Particularly if you look at the Guide Dog Foundation, right. That's what we do. But I think it's helped us take it into a deeper level, and having people understand more about the service behind the logo or the brand as well.
So how did you develop that Today Show relationship?
It's the organization's been working with the Today Show for a number of years. The first dog that the organization had prior to my tenure was Charlie, who was paired with a veteran out of South Carolina, and we've been able to maintain the relationship because I'd like to think our team has done a great job in not only raising the dogs, but being able to tell the story behind the dog and how the dogs are going to help. And when you have credibility like that, you need to do a good job, right? And our folks have worked very hard to establish those relationships and look at the quality of what we're doing.
Okay. It seems like every time I turn around, you're throwing out a first pitch, or how many first pitches have you thrown out?
Actually, only one, but we sent that out a number of times.
I think I've seen it 100 times from 100 different angles then, because I thought you threw out 100 different first pitches.
It's a strike, no matter how you look at it.
Baltimore Red Sox, right?
The Orioles, Red Sox, yep.
Yeah. Okay. But you're in the media, whether it's, as I said, throwing out a first pitch in a baseball game, or news on former President George Bush's service dog, Sully H.W. Today Show with Sonny. I mean, you're always out there. I mean, how do you go about getting all that press? How do you, kind of leverage that into, as you started to say before, into additional partnership opportunities?
Yeah, so I must say we have a very small marketing team, at America's Vet Dogs and Guide Dog Foundation, and they're very good. We've had we have a director of marketing and a public relations manager whose job it is to get us out there and put us on TV and do all the social media, and we have a full team of 4 when you look at all the other the different positions within the team.
But again, 4 is not a lot
Yeah.
based for the amount of coverage that you get and the amount of, again, you are absolutely everywhere. I mean, I don't think there's a day where I'm not flipping through something and I see your face.
Yeah.
And like I said, it is a nice face. But
Yep, but it's the team does a great job, and it's about being ready to leverage the opportunities as well, right? So I'll dovetail into President Bush and Sully for a second, because that was certainly the biggest thing that's ever happened to the organization. We built up a relationship over years, with Walter Reed Medical Center. One of our service dog program managers, had a great relationship with Walter Reed. And then when Walter Reed got the phone call from the Bush family about potentially getting a service dog for President Bush 41 after Barbara Bush had passed, they referred us. And ultimately, we worked diligently with the president's family to make sure they had the right dog, make sure they were trained well, placed them up in Kennebunkport, Maine. And then, and very untimely, the president passed 6 months later. And, the first photo of the president's casket had, his dog Sully laying in front of the casket, right? An iconic photo that is, will go down in history. And,
and how much did you pay for that?
Nothing, no, nothing at all. But he,
so it's not like the Game of Thrones Starbucks cup.
No, no, not at all. The Bush family's been nothing but first class and outstanding to us, every step of the way. And I think Sully did a nice job for the president. But from the time that photo went viral,
right,
till today, we've had over 50,000 unique media stories,
wow,
nationally, internationally, local, otherwise, on President Bush and Sully. And if you do the math, even if you put the full marketing team and add me to it, so that's 5 of us, if we just divide it and conquer, that's 10,000 stories each. We were working 24/7 through that period, through the holidays and into the new year, to make sure we maximized every opportunity to tell the story about Sully. And I got to tell you, the outpouring of support we received from the public was tremendous. And we received about a year's worth of applications in less than a month. And so telling the story was great, but now we need to continue to build on an infrastructure
that comes from it, right? Yeah.
To move forward. But I was on a train. I went from New York to DC, New York to DC, New York to DC. I think 3 times in a day and a half. Just doing some of the different media requests that we had out there. We had a major event on our campus where the international media came when we brought Sully home after the president had passed. And then there was equally international interest in Sully and international media coverage when we brought him to Walter Reed, where he's now working as a facility dog. So you got to having been in the media previously, I think it helped us prepare for what was about to come on this. But as I tell the staff all the time, they did a great job, but the moment wasn't too big for the organization.
Right.
I've seen people get eaten up and swallowed up, by a media wave like that. But our team nailed it out of the park.
So, I mean, obviously that's an obvious kind of campaign or marketing opportunity or news opportunity. I find that a lot of organizations, they don't see those opportunities when they arise. I mean, what should an organization be looking for in terms of a kind of immediate opportunity within their organization?
I think the easiest way to look at it is say yes, then figure it out. Right? It's if you have an opportunity, and it makes sense for you, go for it. Figure out the pieces of it. Figure out how to leverage it. But I guess what I'm getting at is nothing is too big and nothing is too small.
Right? I think I'm asking the question from a different perspective. Okay. I mean, I think a lot of times things happen within organizations and they don't do an effective job of pushing it out to the media.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
How does an organization know what they should be pushing out and how do they ensure that they're not being too much of a pain in terms of pushing out too much information or whatever?
Yep. Yeah, and it's a fine balance, but I can tell you, the landscape has changed significantly over the last 5 years with social media, right? I mean, we're pushing content out, to millions of people, every couple of minutes. You could you could have all these different channels and followers, and schedule content to be delivered and interact with everybody. And you could really use that as a test for what's going to work well and what's not. From a media standpoint, you always need some type of angle, right? What's different about this dog or this client or your organization that they haven't heard 50 times before. It's about finding the unique human interest stories that are out there, and then being intentional about trying to place them. I mean, we have a very aggressive public relations strategy. Our PR manager is pitching every day multiple stories to multiple venues, and that is an intentional strategic decision by the organization to invest in that team and to try to make them as successful as possible.
So what it sounds like to me is that not only when you sit down and you develop a strategic plan for the organization, you also develop a strategic marketing plan.
Oh, there's no question. There's no question. We just sat down and went through this process for our new fiscal year, which starts July 1, and we have very ambitious goals. We're looking to place basically over 100 stories for each organization a month, and when you look at the numbers we had with Sully, I mean, we did 50,000 in 1 month. So we're trying to make it more realistic, but very ambitious for us to think we could get 100 stories every month. So that's averages more than 3 a day. And that's if you're including the weekend, right?
Right.
So we have very clear goals that we want to meet. We have, the one thing that works well for the organization is every day you could capture some heart-wrenching, inspiring content.
You got two of the big three. You've got the vets and you've got the dogs. You were just missing, as I said before we got on the air, is you're just missing the kids.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, there may be more to come on that, as we look forward. But ultimately, it's just such compelling storytelling. Ken, any day we could talk to somebody on our campus about what a rough go they've had, particularly as a veteran, and how much they're anticipating, the dog, helping them, and then ultimately when they come back to campus or help us, tell their story. The joy on their faces, that the dog has really done such a great job for them. In many cases, people come to us at a very low, dark point, and the dog, may be the last thing they're looking, for to help them, and the success rate is really tremendous. And it's every day there's something happening.
Right. That's great, because that all helps in terms of telling that story. And I think one of the problems that most nonprofit organizations have is, there is this social media and there is all these outlets, but how do you get your voice heard over every other organization that's out there? And that's kind of been one of the biggest challenges is, I've got a story to tell, but how do I tell my story where people are going to be able to hear it with so many other people telling in essence, the same story?
Yeah. No, it's once again, it comes back, to the concept of, intentionality and goals, but you need to have, a distinct, story with an angle that people haven't, heard before, or you need to tell it in a way, that is, non-traditional. So you do stand out. I tell our team all the time, in New York alone, the greater New York area, there's over 40,000 registered, charities, so if we're not doing our job well every day, there's plenty of other people who'll be happy to talk to our donors and to our volunteers to do a good job. So I think it's you got to be sincere about what you're trying to communicate, because people will see right through it if it's if it's not sincere. I think it's got to be from a public interest standpoint. There has to be a very humanitarian angle, at least in our storytelling. What the difference is. But you also need to build relationships behind the scenes as well. If you're looking at the business of this, it's not necessarily the storytelling, but it's investing time in meeting producers and pitching and really working it. In some cases, the media comes to you organically, but 90% of the things we place and 90% of the stories we have is earned media, meaning our team or us or whoever it is working and pitching to get the stories told.
I like the aspect of the business side of this. that you mentioned, because again, a lot of times people look at this as I'm a nonprofit organization, and there's almost like an entitlement that should come from this because I'm a nonprofit organization, as opposed to looking at it as I'm a business, and part of my business plan or part of my business strategy or part of my business value is to go out and do this.
Yeah. No, I mean, we run these organizations like they're businesses. They're two separate businesses. We have a very clear plan. We execute on that plan. We're dependent on revenue, and you have to make wise decisions with the donor dollars. And so everything we do is intentional, right? There are things that are important that if you don't have the money to invest, then you can't do. So there's definitely that component to it. But we're not sitting around waiting for the the money truck to come, right? You have to work at it every day and scratch and claw. The competition here on Long Island is so intense. There are so many charities that have compelling stories. That you need to be very, very proactive in managing and brand awareness and telling your stories and really giving people a reason to believe.
And I don't even think it's just the competition here on Long Island. I think you're talking about competition worldwide. I mean, because the world has gotten so much smaller with the internet, and people, through some of the stories that are told in terms of landslides or earthquakes or typhoons or whatever it happens to be, the money comes. It used to be people gave locally. I mean,
Right.
that doesn't really happen anymore.
No, I mean, we have donors all across the world, right? And we have graduates and staff all across the country, and people who do a very easy job of doing their research on you and finding all kinds of information about you. And the one thing I've found that always works best, at least for me, is that you're just honest and transparent with people, right? You're not going to be able to do everything. Every year is not going to be the best year. But you got to be able to celebrate your successes when you have them. You got to be able to distinctly let people know why you're doing what you're doing, and the impact that it has. And you really gotta be wise, with the dollars, because if you're not, it can spiral away from you real quick.
Over the last 15 months, you've been with the Guide Dog Foundation. Why don't you talk a couple minutes about some of the things that you've kind of learned through this process? I know you've came in with a ton of experience, and but in terms of those 15 months, what have you learned through that process in terms of how you've been able to kind of leverage brands, leverage
Sure.
all of this stuff?
Sure. Going back to my earlier comments, the first thing I learned was, the quality of the people, right? We have a lot of good people who are doing good things. And, so that was number one. Number two, from the business perspective, it was really about understanding, how the business operates. Where does the money come from? Where does the money get spent? What does the money get spent on? And how can we best impact that, in a favorable way?
And does that, where that money gets spent and how you spend the money, again, with you, with the vets and the dogs and everything else, that's helpful. But I mean, does that help in terms of being able to leverage bringing those dollars into the organization?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have to look, if you look at, the landscape, of our organization, there's a very small component of it that comes in organically. But the overwhelming majority of the funding, comes to us through earned efforts and, through planned, whether it's expenses in staff or, expenses investing in social media or whatever those things are, those strategies and those budget decisions that you're looking at, ultimately, if you make the wrong ones, are going to impact, the bottom line. If you make the right ones, you'll be successful. But not everything's a success. You have to be able to take some risks too. And, in a nonprofit, that's hard to do sometimes because, you take so seriously the donor dollar and, the value of donor intent. So you don't want to fail, but you have to be willing to try new things from time to time.
Right. So one of the things that I've seen that the Guide Dog Foundation has been tremendous with is the whole concept of planned giving.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I know a lot of other organizations have tried to get into and have just not been able to find ways to be successful in that planned giving opportunities and planned giving area. What do you think you guys have done differently that has kind of gotten you to a point where your planned giving efforts have been so successful?
I think it goes to the to the brand recognition and the quality of the job that the organization's done over the years, and really building quality relationships with donors and keeping them informed about what the organization's doing. I think our core base of supporters are incredibly passionate. Incredibly passionate. It's personal to many of them, 90% of our donors, have no problem, expressing, why they're supporting our organization and what their expectations are. So I think from that standpoint, if you're good brand stewards, if you're putting out, quality, quality dogs and quality, you don't want to call them products, but quality experiences and life-changing experiences, and you're able to connect with people so personally. I think that's the number one, factor in, why the organization's been so good at plan giving. On the business end of it, we have just upgraded our, plan giving strategies and, some of our technology associated with plan giving, and are going to be communicating with people a little more frequently, letting them know that, we're out there and, we need a lot of money to do what we do.
You've been very good, though, at not just bringing in dollars from the people whose lives you've touched, but bringing in dollars from the general community, which is something that, again, a lot of organizations have a tough time. And typically, organizations receive donations for one of three reasons. One is because you've touched somebody, or touched an individual, someone in their family, or someone they love. Second is because they have a kind of an affinity to your organization and your mission, or third, because somebody that they know asked.
Right.
You've kind of transcend that a little bit, and you get donations because you're out there and people just love your organization, and you're a household name.
Mm-hmm. No, there's no question, and we don't take that lightly. It's everything we do represents our brand and our service, and going to your comments earlier that you see us everywhere, that's intentional, and we grind it out every day. It's even though we are household, in certain aspects, we're fighting for our lives every day. It's we need to raise north of $15 million each year to pay the bills, and that's a lot of money to raise,
especially when you're not getting any government funding.
Yeah,
and it's all
and you can't rest on your laurels, and you got to be hungry, right? And I think our fundraising team does a good job of being out there and communicating and telling the story. We are content rich. There's no question about it. But any year could be a bad year if we don't do our jobs well.
Right. So you've got all this momentum and high profile opportunities. Kind of what's next on the horizon for you guys?
So it's really it's an exciting time to be part of the organizations. We are growing. We have record demand. As we're sitting here. So we're looking at our facilities as we move forward, potentially looking to invest in our facilities, make some upgrades, some technological advances, so that we're able to serve more people and get through some of that demand in a quicker way, and most importantly, without sacrificing quality. So we're going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to look at our physical plant. We're going to look at our training programs and see how we can introduce technology. From a business standpoint, we're looking, to plan that growth and have to provide a business structure for that growth. And, that'll be the interesting part, because, donors don't like to invest in overhead and invest in,
it seems like
staff.
Infrastructure and administration are like taboo words these days.
But you can't do it without it.
Right.
You can't do the job without it. And, luckily there are sophisticated donors out there who understand that. But ultimately, it's providing the structure for the next 75 years of the organization is really what we're up to.
I mean, one of the cool things that you guys do also, and if you want to talk a couple minutes about the program that you have with individuals who are incarcerated in terms of puppy training and stuff, you want to talk about that a second?
So we utilize prisons from all across the East Coast, from Maine to Florida, to raise the dogs for America's VetDogs. So we have, I believe it's 15 different prisons at this point, over 100 dogs in these prisons, living with inmates who we work to train, and they help us train the dogs. And it works out well, because the dog is there with their trainer, continually being trained. But the thing I like about the program is that the dogs get released for the weekends, right? We have puppy raisers who come and take the dogs for the weekend, so they have regular home life experiences as well. But that prison program is vital to what we do. And as we look to scale up and serve more clients, we're going to need more prisons, or utilize those prisons in a different way. So we're always evolving what we're doing there. But it's people gasp when they hear it for the first time, but it's actually a very effective way for us to help train the dogs.
What I think is cool about it, and when I first heard of it, it was like, oh, this is such a cool idea, because again, it's another way to partner the way that my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that, you know, the prisoners have to be model prisoners in order for them to get assigned a dog. So there's incentivization, if that's even a word,
Close.
for the you know, to be a model citizen in order to kind of get a dog and to not lose the dog. And you know, it's really working towards rehabilitating the individuals that are in prison, as well as, you know, meeting your needs. So it's really two organizations effectively working together to accomplish what they want to accomplish mutually, and getting the best results on both ends.
Yeah, no, it's a privilege to get one of the dogs when you're in prison. There's, you know, large waiting lists of prisoners who want to take these dogs on. You know, you can just imagine what it does for their quality of life, you know, in there. But they only go to the best behaved and, model citizens, so to speak, within the prisons. And you know, as you look at that program, it's very much helpful to, the prisons, the inmates who get the dogs, and it's helpful to us, and they take, what's really surprising to me about the whole thing is how seriously they take it. They take this very seriously because they don't want to lose being in the program because of what the dog does for their quality of life.
And it's that out of the box thinking that's really cool, and that's one of the things that both you and the organization. And as I said before we even started the podcast, I thought you coming on into this organization was a perfect fit for the organization, because the way the organization is very outward thinking and has that whole thing of, thinking way outside the box and coming up with really cool strategic ways to kind of leverage and kind of push the organization forward. And you have that same thought process in terms of how you operate. So I thought that was kind of a perfect marriage between the two, but it's that really cool out of the box thinking that I think that between you and the organization has been really successful.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. It's you never know how these things are going to work out, right? But I think it's been a great run for us. We've had some opportunities that we're able to take advantage of, and we just need to continue doing a good job every day, and that's the best thing you can do. When we're impacting lives, you got to take it seriously. It's okay to have some fun with it, and not be totally crazy about it. But in the end, I think you got to tell the story, because if you're not, you got 40,000 people right around the corner who will.
That's right. So we're running low on time. So if our viewers are interested in learning more about these organizations, or making a donation to the organizations.
Hey, listen, we fundraise almost 100% of our revenue every year, and the best way to get to us for America's Vet Dogs is VetDogs, VetDogs.org, and on the Guide Dog side, it's Guide Dog, GUIDEDOG.org. I want to make sure I get that right? But so it's plural on Vet Dogs and singular on Guide Dog.
All right, thank you, John. And if anybody has any money that they want to kind of
and volunteers too. Yeah. We always need volunteers.
So definitely a great organization. So our next one of these Cerini Connection podcasts is going to happen on July 25th. Danette O'Connell from Triumph International will be here, and she's going to be talking a little about a topic that's very important in today's environment, mergers of nonprofit organizations and what nonprofit organizations should be thinking about. So thanks for joining us today. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
No, my
awesome
pleasure.
job.
Thank you.